Welcome to Soul Nutrition, where we discuss the various ways of nourishing our souls. I'm your host, author, speaker, and coach, Reina Rose. Today's guest is Ladawn Townsend. Ladawn is a strategic advisor and CEO of the Voss Group, where together with her team, they grow your bottom line. Her client base reaches across the US, into the UK, India, and Africa, and is currently expanding to include the Middle East and Asia. Ladawn has 20 years of hands-on experience and is a featured contributor on international business news channels, trained in Six Sigma Green Belt process improvement techniques, as well as technology project management. The Voss Group is consistently delivering quantifiable results to all of their clients, including, but not limited to, Fortune 100 companies. Ladawn, it's such an honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Reina. I am so honored to be here today. I've been looking forward to this conversation all week. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And for out there, the audience, Ladawn and I connected last week, and we just had such a magnetic connection right away. I thought, my audience has to hear what you have to say. You've got so much to share with us in business, in faith. And so I'm really excited for you to check out this show today with Ladawn Townsend. Ladawn, tell us, for those out there who haven't, I got to hear your story and I just loved hearing it. Tell us your story. How did you get here to be, taking businesses' profits and increasing them up to 25% just in the first couple of months and really helping people thrive in a way that they hadn't before?
Well, if I had time to sit down with all of your listeners over a cup of coffee, I would share with you how I come from an entrepreneur family. So it started even as early as the age of 8, working with my family. We were doing real estate flipping before it was cool. We doing farmers markets before it was cool. We were doing government contracts. And so the knowledge and the experience I received from my parents helped to set me up for then when I went into high school and took different courses like ROTC to learn life skills, because coming out of high school, I knew I just wanted to go into corporate because that was a part of where I just felt called to go. And that's what happened. And so I didn't have a plan outside of just getting in. I really didn't. People ask me, what did you want to be when you grow up, right? And I just wanted to travel the world. But in order to do that, I knew you needed resources. So I got into corporate America, and I had the pleasure of working for some of the top mortgage companies and banks in the world. And pretty soon I woke up one day and it had been 20 years. And I had been working in corporate America in very high-ranking positions. And I share that not to brag or boast, but to say that when you show up and do the work and you are consistent and you show yourself as a value, then those things happen. And we know that God puts us on a path. And I see now, looking back, that all of the roles that I had in working with companies behind the scenes to fix them was preparing me to work with businesses now. And so that was my journey. And the day that I realized it had been over 20 years, what I didn't know what would happen a few weeks after that epiphany moment is I would get a phone call that nobody wants to get. And that phone call was from my manager saying that not only were my colleagues laid off, but he was laid off, our senior VP was laid off, and I was laid off. And people asked me at that time, were you upset? Were you angry? None of the above, because I had been on a journey for 20 plus years preparing me to have my own business. I didn't really understand all of that. I had played at being a business owner for 15 years until that moment. And I'll share with people later how when you have the call to do something, you need to take action. So here I am, laid off. The executive salary is cut off. And so I didn't have a vehicle in order to replace it because I hadn't taken it seriously the years before. And so that began my journey of launching the Voss Group. And it has been a journey ever since of learning many things, ups and downs, and bootstrapping my business and leveraging all of my life experience and working with companies and working with clients to be able to bring results to them today.
Yeah, that's incredible. tell us a little bit about going into that layoff. I mean, that had to be obviously like so unexpected, yet God is giving you that revelation like just prior. One of the things that you're very passionate about with companies is really deepening their customer base, right? So that they can avoid that layoff trap. Talk to me a little bit about some of the methods you go into and how you work with companies to really give them a solid foundation so that they're not running into these problems later.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So that was one of the triggers for me creating this business. It was two things. One, I was never going to be a woman at the time in her late 30s that didn't have financial options. It wasn't so much of losing the job. And I worked with amazing people. Even my managers to this day are supportive of me. It was really, my options were limited because I didn't have that gift we get in our bank account every week and every 2 weeks of a paycheck, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was what I call an addiction to the paycheck, a negative addiction, because we look at that as our security. And what God was really showing me is that He is my security, that was just the vehicle. And so when I work with companies now, knowing that that was my goal, never want to be that woman that didn't have financial options. And number two, working with companies that would not use laying people off to make budget. I think we're seeing that even more so now as we're filming this in the mid of 2020, with markets not really having a solid prediction of when we're going to go back to normal. Some projections were saying maybe Q3 of 2020 of this year, maybe early 2021. We're actually advising companies, you need to be prepared to ride this through Q4 of 2022, because not just every quarter, every week we're seeing an ordinance change, a relief package come out, a spike in illnesses. So we need to be able to pivot profitably and not in panic. And that takes having a step back to say, what is our business really about? So we typically work with companies that are always in some type of crisis. They just don't admit that they're in crisis. Nobody wants to call the fixer. I would joke with my clients that if I had a private back door, like, the bat cave for people to come into, they'd probably prefer to do that versus coming through the front door, which is okay. I understand. You don't have to call me publicly. Just call me and know that you can call us for help. Because what we do is we get very deep into finding where are the true gaps within an organization. And I want to give your audience an understanding of this, because what I have found in 20 years of fixing companies, that 80% of all businesses have at least 4 or 5 of these key gaps. They do. So there's either smoke before fire, and that's what typically they say, but then we come in and it's really a full-blown inferno, and instead of putting out the fire, you've given people gas masks to try and work through it.
Right.
So
that sounds familiar. No,
so what we do is we look at the core pillars of a company. We look at profit. We look at process, people, technology, and then where are we going? That's what VOS stands for. VOS stands for vision, optimization, and strategy.
I love that.
We cannot get to strategy if we don't know how to effectively optimize your business, and if we don't have a vision. I'm not talking about a mission statement or a brand name. I'm talking about, where is the company going? What are you about? That is needed even more now in the marketplace, because marketing has become very pop culture trending. And so in order for you truly to stand out in your marketing, in order to drive revenue, in order to create an employee culture or retain an employee culture, you must be able to have a vision for your organization. One of our key services, our revenue growth system, when we work with companies, is we work with them on a 3-tiered level within their management. So we work with the founders and the C-suite team on creating that vision and creating and identifying the gaps. We then work with their senior management and frontline managers in implementing every change, every monitoring, every measurement that we have to do. And then the frontline employees, we come in and do training and support. So we are viewed as an outsourced strategic partner, because we come in to make sure there is a holistic support for the company with one goal, and that is to grow the bottom line, to increase profit in the company. And if we don't address all of these facets, you may see some spike in your earnings in one area. But if the left is not as strong as the right, then you will create new leakage. And that's the signature approach that I've worked with companies for over 20 years with, and what I bring to my clients now.
That's incredible. So tell me, I know that you have worked with, like I said, Fortune 100 companies, and you also have worked with the more family-owned businesses as well. What are the differences you see I know that our audience out there has a wide range. Some of them have family-owned businesses, some of them are Fortune 100 company owners or executives and decision makers. So for those out there who are saying, oh, I'm a family-owned business, like, what is my experience and what would I expect to receive if I were to come? And then the Fortune 100s that, maybe have been looking into companies like Deloitte, like different, but this is more of a boutique, more of a one-on-one experience. Tell us, what are the differences between those two kinds of clients for you?
So one of the differences is how accelerated you want to reach your goal is really the biggest thing. And this is why when we engage with companies that want to work with us, myself and my team, we have a team right now between about 13 and 15 people. I'm probably missing someone somewhere. And so we have a team, we're based here in LA, but we have a global team of experts ranging from India into Africa, as well as here in the States. And so we are a boutique firm in the view of we can still provide the same services that the major brands in the consulting world can, many of them that I look up to. But here's the primary difference. Our goal, number one, is to think bigger for our customer. So if you're looking for an expert that's just going to tell you what you want to hear, we're not the right fit for you. My job and my team's job is to see what's next for you, good or bad, and to be able to help you navigate. The biggest thing that we can do is when our customers get to that point in the road, we'd rather them say, I'm glad that boss prepared me for that, versus why didn't anyone tell me for that? That comes from market research we've done in going out and pitching to companies, even to banks, nonprofit organizations. And we were constantly told, Ladawn, I'm left with a binder of theories from the past 3 consulting firms we've hired, and we haven't been able to implement any of them. Or boss doesn't even want to hear the word consulting firm. So how can we get him to even be open to having a conversation with you? These are real life challenges that my team and I have faced for 6 years in growing this business. So because we know what happens in most situations when companies are hiring experts to come in, we take a different approach. At the end of the day, we're going to see bigger for you. And then we're going to help you create a plan to get there within budget. I'm very keen on keeping within budget. Number 2 is we are viewed as an outsourced strategic partner. So many of the times, even when engagement is done with our clients, they will reach out with a new situation that comes up, because strategy is fluid. It's not something that will just stay in one position. Something may happen. Look what we're dealing with now. There are companies that overnight have had to change their business model. Delta Airlines took a percentage of their planes and ripped out seats and became cargo planes. That was not on their 5-year plan or their 2020. Right?
Right.
And that is the biggest item that differentiates us from everyone else. The other item I would say is that we are an end-to-end full-service strategic advisory firm. So whether it is strategy, whether it is sales and marketing, whether it is tech enhancement and tech risk and solutions that you need, and we bring in our tech partners, it's our job to make sure that we don't leave any I undotted or any T uncrossed, which is not the traditional model for most consulting firms, which is why we are a strategic advisory firm.
Yeah. So teach us a little bit, so I'm, company A, and I'm coming to you and I'm saying, okay, my, let's just bring up one of my companies. So we're just starting out, right? Let's have a learning experience to get really everybody engaged here. We're just starting out. We're, don't have a huge budget to do marketing, and we want to, get off the ground and really build a community around this. How does your company, I know you have, different team members from all around. What is the way that your company comes in, and what would you be teaching us? It's that way everybody out here can be learning too.
Love that. So let's walk through this, because this is something at the core of what we teach all of our clients to do. So the goal with every business, and as those are taking notes, if you're a note taker, please write this down. Feel free to tweet me on Twitter at Ladawn Townsend. Your role as a leader is to have a fiscally fit business. That is it. fiscally fit. In order to do that, we have to remove the distractions of what I call the shiny, bright objects that many of us as leaders get pulled into, right? So we need more sales. We have to create a new website. We have to do this. Those are all things that are needed. But here is what we do in the beginning. One of the most popular services we have with our clients is called our lab. The lab is an intensive strategy where we work through with clients a particular one or two areas in their business. What we're seeing now is increasing revenue is a tall bar, as well as technology security. So when we're looking at increasing revenue, the first thing we tackle is, okay, what's the number? Getting very crystal clear on the number that we want to hit. Now, even in the midst of what we're going through now, we still need to get clear on the number. I would not retract your goal. I would extend the deadline for your goal. Why? We are in, as the time we're taping this, July of 2020. So most companies, if you set a goal at the top of the year to go from 20 million to 50 million, I don't want you to retract that goal. I want you to extend it and maybe take that deadline date out through mid of next year or end of 2021. Why? Because when you do that, you are setting a standard within your company that we're not going to run from the goal. Yeah. The big part of revenue goals and increasing businesses and getting acceleration and hitting your numbers isn't so much of the activity as it starts with the leader. When the leader is clear on exactly what we're going to do, and we're not going to back away, we're not going to retreat, here's what happens. There are employees in your organization that will rise to the occasion. And you will see employees that are really a leakage within themselves because they don't want to go above and beyond. They just want to do enough to get their paycheck. And don't be surprised that those individuals are normally your high managers and above that have the highest earnings within your company. Because of that, there has been a culture of enough within the organization. And I say that with all respect because I've seen this with companies 30 years in business, 2 years in business, 10 years in business. And it's because we get comfortable in our organization. Cash flow isn't really a problem before what we're going through now. You know, we have clients, we have marketing, we're known somewhat of our name. So we take our foot off of the accelerator just a bit. And what we find is our competitors have passed us by. So how do you get back into the game? How do you not become a blockbuster that got bought out by Netflix, right? If you don't story about how the founders of Netflix went into that meeting with Blockbuster and were basically laughed out of the room.
Right.
You can go on any social media and find that story because they were thinking ahead and because that company, as well respected as Blockbuster was comfortable and they took their foot off of the accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
Say, number one, know your number.
They weren't doing their market research either, you know, to know that, you know, soon brick and mortar DVDs are going to be obsolete. Exactly. And so if you're there selling a DVD when everything is going digital, you're going to be left in the dust. And so had they been up on that market research, maybe, and, you know, we can't all as business owners be doing all the research, be doing all the, you know, we need to outsource that a lot of times because, you know, we just can't see our own blind spots and we can't do all the research. So it's great to have a company like yours be able to come in and say, here's the research in your category. Here's what we're seeing are the trends. This is, you know, projected. And of course, you know, always like projections are projections, of course, right? I saw one company, I can't remember what it was. It's actually in this book I would keep telling you about. Okay, I'm promoting exponential organizations. It is a great book. But it talks about, you know, I think it was AT&T. They had a company come in, you know, analyze everything. And they said that they didn't think cell phones was a good industry to get into, right? So they advised them, you know, don't get into the cell phone industry. We don't think very many people are going to have cell phones. And of course, now we know cell phones have taken over several other industries, you know, the camera industries and the maps industries, GPS, it's all taken over by cell phones. And so it's funny because, you know, this is why we hire research, but we also, I love that you are also a prayerful person because we can research. And I think it's important to bring in a little bit of both sides, that we have, you know, the research, that we're not just going out, oh, you know, faith and, you know, I don't look at any numbers and just kind of, you know, God told me, which, you know, sometimes that does work. However, I think it's great to be balanced, to say, you know, I've done the work, I've done the research, this is what the numbers say. And then I've prayed And either, these numbers feel right when I'm sitting in with God and listening, or my intuition and, we might call Holy Spirit is saying, the numbers say that cell phones are only going to grow to 1 million users. But my intuition is telling me that this is providing so much convenience to the end user that it's going to revolutionize the way that we live. I say go for it. Go for the AT&T, invest in cell phone usage and towers, right? And so I think that's the balance that you bring that maybe other firms don't as well, is that you have all the knowledge, you have the experience, you do the research, you know the numbers, and then you have the Holy Spirit.
Yes, because that's the biggest guide. And a lot of the times, the world that I work in and my team and I, not everyone has the same faith and belief, right? But the word tells us that you are to do your work as you are serving unto God, not unto man. And so that is why we have to think bigger for our client, because if God is giving me that direction for them, who am I to not communicate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we go through these sort of 3 or 4 core questions that we ask companies, and this is something that even your listeners could do, we get clear on that number. Here's why we get clear on that number, because everyone has an emotion about money. Everyone has an emotion about money. I've been in conversations where people have turned, almost passed out when we talk about taking a goal and 10 timesing it, right? 10xing it. And so that, we don't really need that much money. That is one of the biggest in the world when people say we don't need much money, or we have enough. Talk to those that are very wealthy, they will tell you that there is no example of how much money that you really need. And what we're seeing now with businesses is that they're finding the gaps within their company that existed before this crisis we were in. They're finding the employees, the investors, the team members that were not engaged in doing their job, because now sales have dipped dramatically. The hotel industry, I think as of 3 weeks ago in the US, nationwide, all chains, total combined occupancy rate was under 30%. Wow. The hotel industry. Vegas was like a ghost town in most places. When you have to think about businesses that
touching all that stuff in Vegas right now.
But when you think about the shutdown, even a 90-day shutdown, and companies that were filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, companies that were closing, large companies, small mom and pop shops, we have to wake up to the fact of where do we really get our provision? And when we really are clear on that, and we go through these 3 questions, I'm going to encourage your audience to, I want you to watch for your reaction. So when you're setting your goal of what your number is, are you saying to yourself, well, how is that going to happen? I don't believe that'll happen, or that's too much. What happens is we know that there's a dark force and an enemy that immediately will pick up on what we speak and say, well, they've already professed that it's not going to happen, so therefore you can't bless them with it. And now you're
life and death in our tongue.
Exactly. So when those thoughts come, if you're saying to yourself, well, here's our goal, we want to go from 200,000 to 1 million, or from 8 million to 10 million. And you're saying, okay, what do we need to do to prepare for that? That's a positive question. When Moses went up on the mount, he was having a conversation with God. I'm going through reading the Bible from beginning to end now. Pray for me. I'm trying to get through it in 6 months. And when God gave him instruction, he didn't say, well, how is that going to happen? And I don't really know how that's going to happen. He would humbly come before the Lord and say, may I ask this? And God, with his grace and his patience, answered the question and gave him direction. As leaders, if we were to humble ourselves to ask for direction of God, this is what's in my heart, or this is what I see as a number for us to hit. Show me how to get there. It shifts your perspective, because you're going to need a shift in perspective to address the next 2 questions you have to ask yourself. Understanding, going back to your point of how to grow your business and accelerate revenue. Number 2 question is, why should anyone want to have and do any business with you? Now, in order to do that, you have to be bold enough and confident enough to stand as an expert in your field. Mm-hmm. Everyone has a viewpoint on where their confidence lies, right? Yeah. Well, I don't want to seem like I have a big ego. You need to have confidence in order to thrive in the marketplace. And if you don't have confidence as a leader, your team won't. So how that shows up for those of you that are like, okay, well, I understand the spiritual part, but how does that show up? That shows up in not pursuing sales conversation. That shows up in your employees and your team members and even yourself missing tasks, not being consistent, not having a level of excellence that's consistent, allowing Sally Mae or Robert to come in late consistently. When people do one thing, that's how they do everything. And all of these little things are a revenue leakage for your company. So that's number two. Why should they do business with you? Why are you an expert at what they do? Why should they pay any attention to listening to you first? And then second, to even pay you. And then the third, and this is what I would recommend for everyone to do before you get into marketing in a big campaign. The third question is, what is the new pain point your clients are having right now? Not the one they had before this virus, not the one that they are telling you about openly. What's the one that they're not telling you about?
Yeah.
You can answer that. When you can address the honest point of, can we address that? Do we even know? Then you can then explore all of the gaps within your company. If you ask your leaders, if you're outsourcing your marketing or sales or anything or vendor relationships you have, and you ask that question of what is the new pain point our customers going through, and they are not able to answer it, that means that even without having market research, you don't have your finger on the pulse of your clients. You know, one of the things, our offices are here in downtown Los Angeles, and a few weeks ago, there were protests that turned into riots, which are two totally different things, we understand. And so many businesses, mom and pop, large retail stores, were trashed in that. We have some clients that have manufacturing spaces in that area. So what did we do? We knew that this virus already had slowed down sales for their organization. It's impacted everyone except for a few key industries and products and services that are out there that have accelerated. And then also we knew, hey, what happened to their facility? It's rare that they can get people in it, but now what happened to it? And so we reached out just to have a conversation. If you've been impacted by this, let's get on the phone and just talk through a strategy plan today, because the strategy they had last month is changing today. How do I safely get employees to work to deal in a healthy zone? And then how do I deal now with their safety, their physical safety? So when you have your finger on the pulse of what your customers are going through, it eliminates all of the back and forth in the sales conversation and all of the proving yourself as an expert, because you can say to them, Reina, I know you asked me about this, and I'll answer that for you. But based on my experience, here is what I see that may happen for you in your business, or here is what will happen, and I'd like to take our time and talk through that. When you approach a potential client or an existing client with that type of confidence, then it accelerates the conversation. So in order to have those three questions answered, it goes back to who's guiding you. It goes back to addressing your own emotions and getting over all of the hangups that are blocking your way of success, because God doesn't want us to be stuck on this Ferris wheel of going in circles. There's so much opportunity that's out there. And even in the marketplace now, I really feel like God is calling believers to the front line, believers that believe in his word, that are not lukewarm,
Absolutely,
that are ready to say,
Amen.
Here's how we navigate in the marketplace. I heard someone a few weeks ago say, how powerful would it be if a successful businessman or woman during their day, when faced with a challenge, moved from behind their desk and got on their knees and just prayed and asked God, I need you, give me guidance. Do you not know he will answer that? I do that, I don't even know how many times. And it becomes routine. I don't even realize, it's not a scheduled thing. So we have to know, as believers in the marketplace, we have to navigate, but we're called to navigate differently. And when you do that, that is where you get additional resources, you get downloads, you get wisdom in order to help your business and also help yourself.
Definitely. When you were speaking, I was thinking of Daniel, praying out on his balcony. And, he had work to do. He had things that he was doing, but he still made a point to pray every day out on his balcony, that was his time for God. And that made him successful in everything else, including, not being eaten by lions or burned up in a furnace.
Exactly. And even Joseph was second in command of Egypt under Pharaoh and came from being a prisoner and sold by his brothers. And even when reunited with his brothers, one of my favorite parts of the scriptures where he was a little upset with his brothers, they were in his household. And I think he had them put away into a room or something. I'm paraphrasing. And he went to him, he says, because I fear God, let's just work this out, right? Like he had a human emotion. And I love that. He said, I fear God. Let me forgive them. Let's move on. And then because of his position, not only did he help to save Egypt, but his family did not starve. When they would have been.
Absolutely. And that's where, I think about in business, we were talking before the show a little bit about a situation that's going on that seems to be bad, but God uses all things together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purposes. And I look at that story of Joseph, and we really tend to focus on brothers threw him in a pit for no reason, that and this and this and that happened to him, all these things that were not warranted. But at the same time, if we look at the beginning of the story to the end on that particular one, Joseph became a lot more discerning about who he told his dreams and visions to.
Yes.
He was just kind of like, hey, you're all going to bow to me. Isn't that great? And then how come they threw me in a pit? I just can't understand. And so, it made him more discerning in everything he did. And by the time the brothers came back, he hid his face and, was discerning. Have they changed? Am I able to trust them this time? I'm going to open up in small amounts and then make sure. And so we see this development of his character and the way that God used that for good to A, save his entire, all of Israel, and B, develop him into someone who was wise and discerning and organized and all the things that he was to be second in command to Pharaoh, because he needed to be discerning to be second in command of Pharaoh too. If he was just believing everybody and thinking that he can tell everybody all of the country business, right? That wouldn't have been a great person to have in charge. So God used even his foolishness to refine him and know those consequences. And so I think that's important too. When you're talking with businesses, do you talk about sometimes, okay, here's some of the things that we've learned from in the past. Here's our current client. Here's who we'd like to get to. How do you have, what are some of the advice that you give when someone says, okay, here's our current client, here's what we've learned, and here's who we'd like to be our client. We want to get from here to here. What are some of the things do you ask them to dig inside themselves so they can really move from point A to point B?
I love that. So when companies want to accelerate or enhance their prospective clients, right? They want to reach a higher level. This happens with all companies that go through, right? So they reach a point, they say, we want to be able to go to serve a different type of customer. There's nothing wrong with that, because what I would say is, number one, why do you want to get into that field, right? At times we work with startups and early phase entrepreneurs. And so I always hear, I want to sell $100,000 package. Well, because we do sell $100,000 packages, I have to ask them, why do you want to do that? And also, you have to have a certain level of confidence in order to stand for that price and deliver an exceptional service, right? Yeah. So in looking at, I want to shift from here to here. One client that we worked with had been in the retail business for 16 years and wanted to shift into a totally different business. And so we sat down and really were able to identify her core client was the same. She was just offering a different service now. And so we were able to come up with a marketing plan for her to take her existing customer base, which was over 1,500 customers, which wasn't bad for a boutique retail business, and how to realign them to her new service, as well as how to keep the existing service going as a stream of income. Because what you don't want to do is take your foot completely off of the accelerator of one mainstream revenue, right, and put it all into the next, because until it gets outside of proof of concept, meaning you have clients that are working with you, you have clients that love what you do and giving you referrals and testimonials, we don't know if this new idea is really going to go. So that's one of the pieces that we take a look at. The other is getting really clear when you're shifting, as going back again as to what's your number, what's your goal. Not just knowing the goal, but we go a deeper level in identifying what the profit margin is. So market expansion is one of the services that we also do, because it ties into growing the bottom line. If a company says, I want to grow bottom line, and they may only be thinking in one lane, we come in and assess where's the best viability for this company to gain profit. And so it may be in a new market. A lot of the times we're matching markets together, meaning we've researched this one area, we think you should take a look at it, and then we move into market expansion, but we have to know the profit margin. Even if you want to stay at home, most companies don't fully understand their profit margin. So they launch a new product or service, and so they see sales coming in, but the profit isn't fully realized on the bottom line of the profit and loss sheet. And that's because the profit margin is out of play. The importance of knowing the number and the profit margin is when you are addressing this new potential pool of clients, you have to be able to approach them with the right amount, especially if it's a higher end ticket. Because if you come in quoting an amount that is less, it is going to depreciate your value in their eyes. They will, and this happened to me early on in my business.
Yes.
I was in service and doing all of this. I was taking like a gallon worth of work and putting it in a child's cup, essentially. So they would say, there's no way that you can deliver this level of service by only charging us a quarter of what you should be charging the full amount. And it's because I didn't do all my research and didn't know. And two, I didn't have the confidence to stand for that price. Now I do stand for that price. So it's really important that when you're looking to shift anything, products, services, markets, clients that you serve, is to get clear on your profit margin, is to get clear on your reason why, and go back to those 3 questions. Why should they listen to you? What's their pain point they're having? And how will this new product or service tie into your revenue number?
Yeah. You know, it's funny, when I started my first business when I was 19, I was doing fitness training at the time. And I started training like one person over here, and when all of a sudden I had a business, right? And the same thing, I was charging, you know, a certain amount. And I remember someone saying, you know, unless you charge double that, you're not going to be able to get these clients that you want over here, because I started kind of marketing in a new neighborhood. And so I was like, okay. So I just started charging double. And it was true, like they wouldn't have respected me in that neighborhood without charging double what I had originally started. And then I had some wonderful clients. You know, I didn't raise rates on anyone that I currently had, but I had some that would raise rates on themselves because they didn't want to become the ones I started cutting, right?
You're putting yourself in demand. That's very smart.
Yeah. So, you know, I started getting the ones at double, and then the ones who were at half, you know, they started raising themselves $10 an hour, $20 an hour at the time. And so it ended up being, you know, I ended up bringing both revenue streams. So I want to talk to you about multiple revenue streams. So when someone is selling, let's say, a product, and say, for the sake of everything we're going through now, it's an online product, right? Something that at least people can contact them online, and they've got a good website going. What are ways that people can bring in more revenue on that website? Like, I don't know, advertising, creating a community on the website. Do you deal with crowdfunding? You know, there's a lot of buzz around crowdfunding now and how to bring that into business. What are some of the strategies that you have used in the past or with current clients that help to bring in extra sources of revenue than just your main product or service?
When we look at diversifying the revenue pool, I love that idea. And many companies before that should have been doing that are finding they really need to do that now. Even if they have a product that still has to be delivered in a non-online fashion, right? They're having to do virtual meetings, virtual sales consultations, presentations, all of that. Here's the number one thing that you want to take a look at when you're creating multiple streams of revenue, streams and products or offerings or services for your clientele, is it needs to tie into a journey. What's the journey? So it needs to have an entry point, a mid-level, and then a larger point, and then even beyond. So when you map that out, it'll guide the lead, it'll guide the customer into that journey. Why do you need that? Because sometimes, maybe if you have a book for $20, there could be an executive of Fortune 100 company that'll buy the book, they'll date you by just buying the book before they'll go into a larger package. So not only do you have to have that journey, you have to answer the questions about what is the pain point I'm addressing in each one of these services. So you don't want to give the whole gallon in the child's cup. You want to be able to have it to be measurable, but to give value. That's number one. Number two is, what is the experience of your client, the onboarding experience? There's a lot of focus on the initial marketing and the sale, but what's the experience? Meaning, what's going to happen from the moment they agree to work with you, within 2 weeks, within 30 days, within 6 months. One of the things when we go in to do business process improvement as a part of our revenue growth system is we map this out. It is already a part of the package. If people tell us, oh, we already have our customer service and our ops down, great. And I ask them these questions and they see that they need this, because when your client experience aligns to the sales process, all you're doing is continuing on in the sales process of nurturing that customer as a customer. Because even though they've purchased from you, it doesn't mean that they're an advocate for you. You still need to earn that relationship. A large online platform is learning that recently, with some of their advertisers being pulled to the tune of, I think, almost $35 million in ads was the last count. Now, why that's happening, I haven't dug into all of the news yet to find out, but what we know is that is a major impact. So how your onboarding experience, how are you going to take care of them? How are you going to know? The reason I talk about this onboarding experience is the number one area to make sure you don't have a loss in revenue is capturing your canceled accounts or return products. Because a lot of the times you could be reporting, we sold 200 new widgets this month. But if 50 of them were actually returned, then you actually have only 150 net new customers. Yes. So those canceled accounts, those accounts that are not renewing their products or services, will tell you a lot about what your revenue streams are actually delivering to your customer. And the other area around crowdfunding and looking for investors, here is the number one tip I'll give people who are looking for funding, is you need to learn how to sell. I talk to nonprofits who say, well, we don't really sell, we ask for donors. Everyone needs to know how to sell, because as worthy as your cause is, even if it is for the church, if you cannot clearly communicate what is the purpose, what is the benefit for the person you're asking for to invest, and to guide them through the dialogue of getting them to say yes, a strong maybe, or if they're really a no, then you have gaps within your process. So crowdfunding, and we talk a lot about this with companies in Northern California or in the IT space that are funding and all of going through the new tech startup, whether they're in the new tech of the South, which Austin is being called, or even Nashville, Tennessee. Those are two cities that are on the map.
Nashville, last time I went there, it was just building like crazy. I couldn't believe it.
The new, it's sprouted up because people saw so much different benefit that was happening. So you have to learn how to sell. You have to be able to know how to close the deal, because investors are becoming extremely leery on doing investments. We talk with companies internationally all the time, and countries that are looking at their FDI, which is their foreign direct investment that a country gets. They're seeing that in some of their top countries that give are starting to slighten up a bit. If it's 1 to 3%, it is still a raise for alarm, because that's 1 to 3% less that your country is getting for your FDI. If you were getting investment money and it starts to slip, something has happened in the decision-making process of that investor that they are not fully an advocate for you anymore. Because when they are an advocate for you, it's not a surprise when that starts. They've already communicated something. So with crowdfunding, any type of investments, loans you're trying to get, you need to know how to sell. You need to know how to have a conversation with a private banker if they're declining your application, and be able to pitch your story. This is where you have to be comfortable with your number. This is where, with all due respect, you have to get over your mess. Because if you have been given a business, you've been given this vision, this purpose, just to talk to our believers in the audience, if you've been given that, it is, one, not going to easily come to you. You're going to have to fight in order to get it. You're also going to be able to have the skill, because God will equip those that he's called to his purpose. He doesn't call the people that are already equipped to it. So you may be saying, I'm not an amazing salesperson. I don't know how to do all this. I had a fear of sales for 10 years before I started my business. And it's because I was hung up on the number, on the money, on asking people for help. I wanted to do it myself. As a business owner now, I'm completely open to asking for help. I just delegated some new tasks to my team today. I'm like, why am I doing this? And they wanted to do it.
I heard today a business owner say, and I guess it's a quote, I hadn't heard it yet, but God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called.
There you go. That's the quote. And it makes so much sense when you think about it. You know, David, for example, he killed a bear and a lion, I think, by his bare hands. So he was getting equipped, right? He had that. But it was a whole nother level to be king. But he had to go through the stair steps first. So in all of these things I'm sharing with you, what I would tell people is at the end of this conversation, ask yourself this question and you'll have one of two answers. When you're listening to all of this, you'll say, based on what she told me, I'm either A, going to take a deep, long look and I'm going to go in and see the things that are holding me back, that I'm holding myself back, and I'm going to address it. Or you may say, nope, I'm fine, I'm good, I don't need to change anything. The percentage of people that are actually good and say the latter are the ones that, unfortunately, I find within a short amount of time no longer have a business. Because we're not willing to address the gaps that start with us. And we need to address those gaps, because in order for you to fulfill this purpose you have, what God is calling you to do, it is going to stretch you in ways that you haven't thought of. And you're going to have these tough conversations with yourself in order to have the tough conversations with your team. Because in getting crowdfunding or growing a business or scaling, it's going to get to a point where it's outside of the things that you can wrap your arms around. And you have to be able to have a company that can sustain without you.
I want to talk about scale. Obviously, I've been looking into a lot of selling multi-million-dollar products, right? And in the past, I've sold thousands or, packages that are worth thousands. What is the difference? What mentality shift does one need to do? What tactics? Some things that I was reading, like for a smaller item, if you're going to buy a product for your face or something like that, this short form copy on Instagram could sell you on, buying a $50 or less product, right? And that if, I was reading about people who want to buy $1 million products or multi-millions, they'll read a book if they can find it, right? They're going to read long copy. They're going to want to spend a lot of time researching this product. This sales conversation is going to be a lot of relationship building. Right. So when someone is selling a small ticket item versus a very large ticket item, what would you say are the differences in maybe the advice that your firm would give, the ways that you would steer them?
Yes. So when you're looking at a smaller ticket item, I want to address this first, because there's a myth out there that you can sell $1,005 items and make $1 million, right? So you can do that, but I will tell you,
yeah,
I will tell you from being trained and listening to those that are in the market and are multimillionaires and have done that, the machine behind that business is massive. The marketing engine, the people involved. I heard Gary one time say that his marketing team at one point just for his brand was 15 people. 15 people.
Wow. So
you have to understand that there is a machine involved. So my question to you is, if you have something of value, why are you only charging $5 or $97? And I can say that because initially my 1 hour strategy sessions was $197. They are now over $2,000 to work with me for an hour, and it's only for select clients that have already worked with me before. So you have to understand what that is. You have to understand the market. It is more of a quick decision. It's easier to sell something under $2,000 that wouldn't really need a higher sales conversation. So you can have shorter copy, more copy. That's why you sign up for some email list and you'll get an email like 2 times a day, because they know that 1 out of every 3 emails are actually read by an individual if it's for that market, if it's for a smaller end product. When you're selling to a higher end market and a higher end service, it's a different type of buyer. I had a coach one time explain it to me this way when I was first trying to figure out my business, and she told me, Ladawn, I want you to be the Chanel. And I was like, what do you mean by that? She says,
well, thank you.
When you go into Chanel, I had never been in a Chanel store, but I just played along like I did. And so she says, there's no discount racks. There's no clearance racks. What the price is. That changed everything for me. Everything for me. I understood her point. Sometimes you have to be the Chanel. Now you can still be the Chanel at your $97 product, but you have to understand you're talking to 2 different markets. And I want to get clear on this, because sometimes when we coach business owners that are in the early phases of their business, and even some that are a little bit more established, I'll say, who's your end customer? Everyone. Consumer, business, nonprofit. I can only imagine what the marketing team is going through, because how you market to a consumer is different than how you market to an executive. And we live and breathe this today.
Isn't there an expression that if your market is everyone, your market is no one?
Exactly. It's not. a part of our business with the Boss Group is we have our corporates and executives that we work with, and then we have our startups. But when we get into all of those levels, we ask a number one question of what's your revenue? Because what a company doing $50 million a year needs is very different than my client that was doing $350 million a year. Very different conversation of what's needed, very different approach of what's needed, of how I sell to them, of the support that they need, of all of that. So what I want to speak to is for those that are selling a higher end, your conversation is going to be different. It is going to be relationship building. You still need to be on your A game. You still need to build rapport. One of the things that we do as a part of engaging with our potential customers is we have a Tuesday coffee with the strategist. It is a complimentary 45-minute group strategy huddle I do with C-suite executives and founders. It is an application process because we do cultivate and we're very reserved about that community. And so we get together, especially now, and talk about what's happening now. You need strategy now. We talk about what tech you need, what type of human resource issues may be coming up, how to navigate your strategy, how to navigate your profit plan. And so every week we go through that. If you're interested, please email me directly, Ladawn, L-A-D-A-W-N, @bossgroup.org, and I'll have my assistant get all that information to you. And so you want to be able to really understand exactly that, navigating that conversation. You are going to need collateral and information that explains exactly, going back to that question, the point they're dealing with now, because these people are reading the books. Also there's a study I found that, I don't remember the source, but they said that executives in the C-suite and above spend about 3 hours a week on YouTube watching videos about what they need to know. So YouTube is their channel, not so
much.
And I know some marketers will disagree with me that Facebook is not the market for executives and founders. I'm just saying, I have found that it's LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Facebook would come in fourth for that. So if there's stats out there, great, I'm willing to take a look at it, but just from being in this for 2 years of working through a certain type of prospecting, this is what we've seen. So you have to know what's out there. So we put together case studies. We put together free webinars that we send over with specific information of what they need. I'm working on 2 books right now to be able to give out to our prospective market and our clients. So you have to be able to stay on the cutting edge. They're not looking for just the next solution. They're looking for a powerful solution. And again, if you don't show up powerful, if you don't show up confident with that and not being back and forth on who you are and what you stand for, you could actually burn that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like absorbing all of that. Like, okay. So going into like, of course, for higher level executives and high price products, you want to be on, for social media, LinkedIn, like you said, Twitter. I mean, the president himself is tweeting all the time. So, that level executive is on Twitter. And YouTube I love because it's also more long form. It's more, this is where they're going on to educate. And if they're able to educate and connect with you there, this is where they could reach out but get to know you a little bit before committing. You kind of talked about buying the book and dating you. It's like, before they're getting married to you in a business decision, they can learn what you have to teach them, that see if, and I always tell people when I've hosted different summits and things like that, and I have speakers coming in, I always say, give your best information. Teach us as much as you can, because if someone can learn a whole bunch from you in an hour, they're going to know that they can learn a whole lot more from you in the next 6 months to a year.
That's only if you are an expert in what you do, Reina. And unfortunately, what we've seen in the marketplace, especially with the online marketplace, is we have people that are calling themselves experts too soon.
Yeah.
Giving away their best bushel of apples before, and that's all that they have, right? And so in the consultant space, in the coaching space, there are customers that are burnt out, that have had bad experiences, which makes our sales process even more challenging, of having to win over that executive that spent 80 grand on a solution that was left with nothing. So I agree with you, bring your best, but you have to have more content than just that hour.
Absolutely. I guess that was in my mind, that you obviously have more to teach them. But and I find though that the ones who are reluctant to teach their best content are the ones that tend to not have any more apples in the bushel, like that they don't want to give away their secrets, because that's all that they're trying to get you to pay for those. but it's like, when you give away your secrets, people need to know how to do that secret, so it's like, well, you're just telling me the secrets, but I need some instruction how to get there. If you tell it and I already know it, then I don't need that service. But if you tell it and I go, oh, how do I do that? Then obviously, we need to work together more closely. I want to make sure we talk about your Revenue Accelerator Summit. Yes. Tell us about it. What is that? It sounds exciting. I just want to know more about it.
So our Revenue Accelerator Summit is our third year. The first 2 years we held it in Miami in person. So we know that that's probably not happening this year. So we're doing it virtual. It will be in October. And it is going to be 2 days where we're talking about, with leaders, how can you accelerate revenue in the state that we're currently in? And so we will have attendees from around the globe. We have corporate clients in India and Africa, so we're marketing to all of those markets. And the recommended attendee for this would be your C-suite team, your senior executives, your founders, those that are on the front line of making the decisions around the strategy for the business. We're going into high-level conversations and into the weeds around what you need to know in order to increase your revenue, what investors are looking for, not looking for. We're going to have some panels involved in order to really give that insight and information. So it's going to be virtual, so you can be comfortable at home. We will make it an engaging experience, so it's not just a lecture where you're seeing on the screen. We will be engaged. It will be a limited audience that we will have because we do come to work. So be prepared to do some work. That's why we invite you to bring your teams together. You'll have times to break out into huddles, to implement what you've learned. So again, everything that we do, we just don't give theory. We give you something that you can implement in your business right away. And our Revenue Summit, our third annual, is going to be that. And hopefully next year, prayerfully next year, we can move it back to India. It's a beautiful country. I love India. I've been there before. Would love to be able to open up our audience to that market and have everyone in person when we can do
that. Some of these emerging markets, I've read a lot. I'm not sure if you've read the book Factfulness.
I haven't.
Bill Gates calls it one of the best books of our times, and it talks about Africa as well. You talked about having a market in Africa being some of the most emerging markets we have, that because people have this mentality from the 1960s that, oh, this is only poverty and this is all that exists within these countries. We still think that because we didn't make the effort to go, because in our mind, all that exists there is poverty, when really the populations are so high, these businesses are expanding, and it's a huge market potential. Speaking of market potential, I want to ask you, before we close here, for business owners coming into this phase 2 of the new normal in the marketplace, going on with everything that's happening in our world, what do business owners need to focus on?
They need to focus on driving revenue by all means necessary. You need to cut out busy activity for yourself and everyone in your organization. I would say that 60% of the activities need to be revenue generating. Your customer service team, your marketing team, your HR team, your accounting team. Everyone can look for revenue in different ways. Let me give you an example with your accounting team. Your accounting team is handling invoices, accounts payable, all of those things. They should be looking at, out of our invoices or new orders coming in, year over year, or from this time last year, what repeat customers have reduced their spending with us. That is a huge red flag. That would be an immediate handoff to their sales manager or to someone in sales to say, hey, Reina, I just wanted to reach out. Thank you for doing business with ABC Company. We had a few questions for you. And I noticed with your last order that it was a bit less than before. Is there anything going on that we can help with? Address the animal head on. Don't run from it. For customer service, when people are calling in with questions, I highly recommend that you have some type of software, depending on the size of your company, where there are notes captured from every person that speaks to a customer. Your customer service representative should be trained that they look at the previous notes. And if this customer is calling in repeatedly, asking for status, asking for questions, giving complaints, that should be escalated to a team that addresses it. Don't wait for the customer to address the issue, you address it. Because these are ways that they can drive revenue by retaining customers. Your sales.
Absolutely. It saves so much money just to retain your customers rather than go out and find new ones.
Yes. Your human resources team, how they increase revenue is that they are monitoring the accountability and consistency of the work of everyone in the company. And when people fall off, it's addressed, not later, it's addressed now. we no longer live in a place where people can just give okay. They need to be giving 150%, because if the company doesn't stay afloat, in the old days, meaning before this crisis, the beginning of this year, someone could just go find another job. But in the US, in the past, I think 16 weeks, we've had over 40 million Americans file unemployment. That means that even though some jobs are coming back, and I think we had 1 week, 2 million new jobs come up, you still have a large percentage that are struggling to find jobs. So everyone needs to root for the company right now. If they're not rooting for the company could probably not be there next year. And then the last team is your sales team. Your sales team need to be focused 80% on driving new business. This is not the time to hear, well, we've always done it this way, or we rely on this marketing, or we rely on this outsource vendor to bring us a lead. You need to be driving business. And you, my friend, as a leader, need to have a hunter mentality in your organization. They need to hunt, and they get rewarded with what they bring in. It's the same thing that we see the Israelites do in the desert. If they didn't go and find it, it wasn't going to come. And then God gave them grace and gave them manna, but they still had to go pick up the manna.
Yes.
So revenue generating activities is the main focus with everyone. And then extending out that goal until end of year, take it out a few more months just to prepare yourself for it.
Yeah, and real quick, just give us a couple examples of busy activities to avoid.
Busy activities would be, I would say your sales team following up on customer orders, give that to someone in customer service. You know, if that's a part of their normal to make sure that they're keeping the relationship, have the customer service person do it and saying, I'm calling on behalf of John, who is your sales manager. Mm-hmm. He wanted me to reach out and make sure this is done. I know he normally speaks to you, but I am going to report to him directly our conversation. Address it up front so the customer's not thinking, well, are you going to tell John? Take the guesswork out for your client. Yeah. Another busy activity for executives is getting all in the weeds about paperwork. The first 15 minutes of the workday with the entire company should be a check-in report of the status. You should know exactly your sales team, what new sales come in, what's in the pipeline, what's a challenge. Your accounting team, everyone should give their piece of a 90-second update in that meeting. And then each team needs to have their own 15-minute huddle. We call it a 15-minute huddle, and that's what we're talking about. What's on deck? What needs to move? What do I need help with? It's an open dialogue with the team. If people are not willing to bring to the table what they're challenged with, they're eating away at your revenue, and they probably needed to be let go, unfortunately, before this happened. If it continues, you will start to see more leakage within your revenue, more than you want at this time. Because instead of having team members, you're really having people that you're having to drag along, and you don't need that. You need everyone to be able to run on all cylinders on their own right now.
Right. Like you said, everyone depends on that because it depends on the company staying afloat and thriving through this time. It depends for everyone's job. Ladawn, it's been such a joy having you on the show. Please let us know where we can find you.
I would say the best way to find us is go to vosgroup.org. That's vosgroup.org. You can also check out my podcast, Grow Your Bottom Line, on iTunes. Comes out every week, 15, 20-minute segment about what you need to know to grow your bottom line today in your industry.
Excellent. Thank you all, as always, for watching. And until I see you next time, may the Lord bless and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, and nourish your soul.